Unlaced podcast. It's actually not bad. It's really good, bro. Well done.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an overdue episode, I feel, on the Unlaced podcast. And I do want to acknowledge we have taken a few weeks off in between some of our recent episodes due to the crazy way the world is with lockdown. So I do just want to send my wishes to all the listeners, all the subscribers out there. I hope everyone is keeping safe in lockdown. We are aiming to keep doing more episodes over the coming weeks, so we are back on deck. So I appreciate you staying and being patient with us. But I'm super excited to kick back our podcast and our venture with a friend of mine that I played football with probably 10 years ago now. And seeing his journey from afar has been actually quite inspirational for what he's achieving at a relatively young age. But very happy to bring you Adelaide United's captain, Stefan Mauk. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, good, bro. How are you?
Very well, man. I'm very well. How are you going in Adelaide? Like, what's the lockdown vibe there? Is it pretty cruisy in comparison to Melbourne?
Yeah, it's pretty cruisy. Unless you're going into a venue, really, you don't even know that it's a lockdown, obviously, or any restrictions, because it was 7 days back, I think 3 weeks ago, and then since then they've just been easing them more and more. And now it's, you go into a restaurant, cafe, you got to wear your mask, and then you sit down and you don't even remember that there is restrictions. So it's being pretty fortunate to be in Adelaide at this time.
Oh man, that's a rubbing salt in the wound. I shouldn't have even asked that. But no, we go a little way back because I want to start like where we crossed roads, which was at the Australian Institute of Sport. I don't know how long we were there with each other, but obviously you came over from South Australia as a South Australian boy, and I moved in there from Melbourne. Can you just talk me through, I guess, that time and that period back in your life and what that was like for you, I guess, moving into an elite institution of football with some of the more elite players around the country?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I think it's quite sad to know that there isn't the institute anymore, because that whole experience for me, not just on the field but off it, I think really shaped who I am as a person and understanding what it takes to be a professional. You're obviously surrounded by other athletes your age in the football program, but also other athletes that are Olympians and trying to get to the Olympics. And they're living and breathing it, and you're just exposed to anything that you, I guess, could want as a young athlete. So it was a great experience, and I loved my time there. I think we spent a few months together. I reckon you actually did a presentation to us. I don't know if you remember that, but
no.
In the
Oh, no.
in the auditorium, you did a presentation. So.
Oh, was this when were you at Sassy then? Were you at the South Australian?
Yeah, it might have been like a few months, like when we had the NPC challenge there in December. You did a chat to us. I think it was all the different states. So yeah, it's pretty funny.
Whoa, what was it good? It must be good if you remember.
I think it was good. Yeah, it was good.
I don't even remember that.
I thought this guy can speak well. He should maybe start a podcast.
Yeah, there you go. I found my calling. No, but I've been really impressed with like you as obviously a footballer, but I think more as a human. Like some of the things that I'm hearing about you, and obviously that we're going to talk through around some of your ventures and your attractions outside of sport, is actually really interesting for someone so young, and probably is becoming a bit more common in the professional life of an athlete. But I do want to just like pick your brain a little bit around the current time, because you're in a preseason now, an A-League preseason, and like anyone knows with the A-League, it's a really sort of short and crammed and full-on season, and then there's an epic long preseason that sort of comes with. It's not your typical preseason in Europe. That's sort of 6 weeks or 4 weeks, right? So how are you kind of attacking that from a mentality standpoint and working through that?
Yeah, I think obviously the A-League preseasons are the longest in the world, I reckon, out of any league. And with COVID, who knows, it probably could be even longer this year than what they're anticipating. But it's tough. I think the FFA Cup, or the FA Cup now, is something that at least breaks it up. But that, again, has been pushed back an extra month. So that's something that's disappointing. And to play friendly games is almost impossible for us with the NPL here. They're cramming so many games in because of lockdown, so we can't even really play those teams. So it makes it a lot more challenging. And for me personally, I'm actually injured. So I just had surgery last Friday on my leg, which has, I guess, not been good timing. But, if there's ever a preseason to be injured, I think this is not a bad one. Because it's going to give me enough time to actually get fit afterwards and back running. So I've tried to just stay motivated and set little goals for myself, and even being injured, even more so, I guess, you have certain sessions that you're obviously doing things that you don't enjoy, but, you're just trying to get the best out of yourself in each session. And that's really all you can do, and not focus too much to the future, because who knows what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I always feel being injured as an athlete is like a very lonely time in professional sport, because you're obviously doing quite a lot of things on your own, and you're kind of separate from the group, and you've got to go through this journey and your own mental battle to get back. But for you, you're obviously a leader and an integral part of the club in regards to like the change room, the on-field examples, the off-field examples. So do you kind of, does that help, like kind of, bring you back into the group and keep you in with everyone, sort of being around the group in that sense? Because I guess you're kind of forced to, still be within everyone and speaking to the coaches around what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree with that. I think it is tough because you are separate from the group. When they're training, you're probably in the gym. When they're doing their prehab, you're not really allowed to be in the gym because it's too crammed. So you do almost feel like you're, not second to the main group, but at a certain level, you kind of are. You're on a different timetable. When they've got days off, maybe you're in training. When it's working out like that, it's obviously it's hard, but at the same time, like, being a leader at the club, I'm able to be in some meetings, and I still try and watch as much of the session as possible. And I guess trying to then go into the other side of it, where we've got 4 or 5 guys injured at the moment. So how can I create a good environment in the rehab section when, nobody likes doing, the grinder or the assault bike or any of those hard sessions, but trying to make it as competitive as possible, because that's, I guess, the way I play. And I think that's something that we can improve on as a club. If we want to be the best, we have to be competitive with everything. So just trying to focus on different areas of it.
Right. So, I mean, separate from your injury, obviously that's probably your main focus, but like from your sort of personal game, has there anything you've identified that you want to really improve upon or even get better at? Or, is there any weaknesses you've identified that you think if you can get better at that, you're going to become an all-round better player?
I think last year, one of the big things for me I wanted to do was obviously score more goals. And I think I did relatively well, bar the last probably 7 or 8 games where I was struggling to run. I was doing really well. And I think the next step to then bring that, where I kind of stopped focusing on it so much, was creating a little bit more. I was more worried about getting in the box, being in the right position, where if a cross was coming in, I wasn't focusing so much on, I guess, hurting the opposition with passes as much or looking for assists. So I think if I can now bring that in as well, then obviously you're the complete midfielder as such. So that's going to be an aim of mine for this pre-season.
Mate, you started last season off on absolute fire. I don't know what your goal to game ratio was in like the first 10 rounds, but it was like pretty incredible. I don't know if you were like top scorer at 1.2, but I recall you banged in like 6 or 7 pretty quick. Which was pretty impressive. But I just want to actually go back to last season, because I don't think as many people gave Adelaide as much credit coming into that season of what you guys could achieve. I think probably losing a couple of senior players. I know you brought in Tommy Urich, but it probably seemed like it was more of a youthful side under Carl Viet, right? And people didn't really give you the credibility that you could go on and do what you did. So, I mean, how do you look back on last season with what you guys achieved? Do you feel you were expecting that internally to get to where you were?
Yeah, I think internally you're always aiming to win it. I don't think any player or any club's going out there not to win it. But if someone said at the start of the season you're gonna finish, I think 4th or 3rd or 4th, I can't even remember where we finished now, but we obviously made the semi-finals and went down to a good Sydney team. So someone said that, you would have been like, you know what, we're in the last 4 with the team and the injuries I think that we had. That's a great performance. But it's, outside, I think we were always, guess being in Adelaide, you're kind of just out of the news and almost irrelevant sometimes. So you just get pushed to the side. And I think we used that as motivation. And it was something for us as players and the coaching staff who were like, well, nobody's speaking about us. Even when I think we went 7 undefeated, people still weren't saying that we were one of the better teams. They were always talking about Melbourne City and Sydney FC are going to come good, and Western Sydney have got great players. So I think, we used that as as something to spur us on. And even for this season, the same. I'm sure nobody's going to talk about us, and we're happy with that because we'll just let our performance do the talking when we start playing.
Yeah, I kind of like when people were saying they're a very young team, I was like, I think it's a really good thing, but I'm like, I don't think people are acknowledging, like, you've got some really good senior players in that dressing room too. It's like, you're not all kids. There's like, I know you're quite a young captain, which I'm going to go into straight after this point, but I mean, there was like Tommy Urich, Craig Goodwin, Ben Halloran, Jakobsen, the two boys from Spain who obviously, stellar careers in themselves coming to Adelaide. So I always felt like it was like a really poor judgment when people were saying that. And I wasn't surprised that you guys got to where you were. It's funny, when we did the A-League, like an overview of the season and a preview leading into the finals, Cam, Watson and even Dario had you as Smokies to win it coming into the finals, because obviously anything, it's really hard to beat Adelaide at Coopers for one. And then you guys' away form wasn't too bad. So what's impressive for me though, and this is actually quite incredible, and I'm glad to see it, but you were made captain of Adelaide United at 25 years old. And I don't really recall anyone across the A-League history that may have been as young as a captain. There might have been one or two, but it's a pretty impressive achievement, right? And I'm really intrigued to know, I guess, how that came about. And I actually think you'd probably be the youngest captain in the club's history anyway, surely. So, yeah, I'd be really interested to know how that came about, and obviously how that, you obviously must have been attracted to that opportunity too.
Yeah, I think I definitely am the youngest one at the club. They told me that, but I don't know about the league. I think Mitch Cooper did one game at Gold Coast.
That was my debut. That doesn't. No, but you're like a genuine club captain.
Yeah, I know.
Do you know, actually, I do.
I get what you're saying.
I just want to touch on this. I spoke. There's Vince Regari. He's a journalist for. I don't know if he's for the Sydney Morning Herald or someone, but he was a journo up in the Gold Coast at the time. You might know Vince. You might have done interviews with him anyway. Yeah. He's doing like a podcast documentary on Gold Coast United. And I had to go, like, he's done a bunch of episodes, he's compiling it, he's going to release it. And we spoke about that day with Coops when he captained, because it was my debut as well. And the only reason he was captain is because he was like 50 days younger. So they made me vice captain, and I listened back, he played an interview back of us, like in the journos, and it was like, they were taking the piss out of us, and I was just like, this is like hideous. I can't believe they put us through that. And anyway, Coops was so nervous that when we were walking out of the tunnel to go onto the field, because we were playing Melbourne Heart at the time, and Fred was the captain and stuff. And we got out to the front, and the ref just looked at him and goes, "Where's your shin pads?" And Coops was like, "Oh." And he had to run back in and get his shin pads on. I was like, we're going to get fucked.
No.
We're going to get fucked today. But anyway, just to go back to your point.
There you go.
So how did it come about? I mean, did you get approached by Bruce, or was it from Carl, or?
So I guess go back a little bit further than that. When I was coming back to Adelaide, it was actually something that I, probably the last season at Brisbane and then coming into Adelaide, I actually wrote down in the journal that I was using then, I wanted to become more of a leader. That was something that I did. I didn't say I wanted to become captain. I just said I really want to become more of a leader. I think I have a lot of experience, even though back then I think I was 24, 23 at this time. I was like, I really want to pass on the experience that I have and not worry so much about myself. I think, when you start to worry and focus more on helping other people, you play better yourself anyway. So 100%. That was something that I obviously wanted to do. And then coming back to Adelaide, even more so, especially once we got into the hub, we had a really young team. Some foreign players didn't come, and then the new season started after the hub. And obviously the club really rebranded in the sense of they wanted to be very South Australian focused. They wanted to provide a good pathway for young players, and that was kind of the way they were going forward. And it wasn't something at this time that I ever thought. Obviously, I was going to be the captain. There was, a chance of really anyone being the captain. I was just going about my business in the best way possible, and I actually missed a lot of the pre-season with the same injury that I just had operated on. But obviously, in everything I was doing, whether it was off the field or on the field, I was trying to, I guess, galvanize the group, make it a better team. And then whenever I was in the media, obviously trying to speak as well as I could and promote the club. And I guess what they were looking for at that time was someone that kind of ticked all the boxes. Ideally, if they could be South Australian, someone that could be a face of the club, good for the media, and someone that obviously set the standard in training was, I'm sure, a massive part of it as well. So it was, I guess the three just combined really well and what they thought about me as a person. And I got called into Bruce's. I had a meeting with I think it was Bruce about a media thing, but before that, Cole Viet called me into his office, and I obviously had no idea what it was about, and he just said, "Listen, like, we've obviously going the way we are with the club. We've wanted to make a few changes, and we've decided to make you the club captain." So it was
that's awesome.
It was something that I obviously didn't expect, really didn't expect, and it was my dog's just barking.
No, you're right.
And yeah, it was a massive shock, to be honest. Like you obviously, I would have loved it, if someone said to me, "You're going to be the captain," but it wasn't something I set out to do. So when he told me that, I was just really, I guess, proud. And then went and did the media stuff for it. And yeah, it was a crazy, probably couple of weeks, just with obviously everybody messaging you, a little bit more commitment of the media stuff. And I guess that's the backstory of it. But I think it was, hopefully people in the club would say it hasn't changed the way I am. If I wasn't captain I would hope that I would still be acting the same way. And I think that's the most important thing.
That's a hard thing to do, man. That's an unbelievable story as well. And I think credit to Adelaide for putting you in a position, because obviously based off the performance and, as I said, the start of last year, you definitely took it in your stride. But I'm interested to know, do you actually think it's changed you, or not necessarily changed for the worse, but changed you as a player in the sense of you feel more responsibility, you actually utilize that pressure and that leadership to make you a better player as well? Do you think those things have actually propelled your game to a new level in any way?
I think probably the first couple games of the season a little bit more. We started okay, and then we had probably 2 or 3 really bad losses, and I missed 1 or 2 of those games as well. So then when I was coming back, I really wanted to make sure that I guess I could impact the team, and that was more so in performances on the field because we needed to win. And it was actually Ross Aloisi that came up to me and said, "Listen, you don't need to try and act any different to what you were before you were captain. You going out there and focusing on your own performance is probably the most important thing, especially at that time of the season when we needed to win." And it was probably something that I needed to hear right then, and stop trying to help everyone else too much and neglect my own game. If you can get a good balance, that's the ideal thing. But he said, if you go out and play well and do your best, people are going to follow you, and they're going to obviously start playing better as well themselves. And that was something I needed to hear. And I tried to, as much as I did with helping other people, but I had to make sure that I was playing, my best football as well. And that was something that, especially those, like you touched on, the first couple months before I think I started hobbling around the field. I was flying, and everything was really good. And hopefully this season it will be the same as well.
It's interesting. Actually, that's great advice from Ross Ellis. He obviously was a former captain of the club. But it's funny you say that, because when I always associated captains on football fields, I always thought it was obviously usually one of the better players or the more experienced, but the ones that were vocal, like in and out of the change room. And it wasn't until I got to Adelaide when Eugene was captain, and Eugene will probably hate me saying this, but like Eugene just never spoke, man. Like he was club captain and never spoke. Not on the field, he would speak to you off the field, but on the field wasn't really vocal. Like he'd tell you things, but his way of leadership was like he would just do 3 match-winning saves in like a 10-minute period, and like your chest would get bigger and you'd feel like, oh my God. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, okay, now I understand why. There are different ways you can lead, and it probably comes back to your point. When you're playing well, that's the kind of lift everyone needs. It's interesting though, because your journey, like you're a proud South Australian boy, which I can tell, and obviously now you're the face of the club. But your initial moves when you left the AIS into A-League clubs were at other clubs, so Melbourne City and also Brisbane Roar. So what do you think you really gained out of those experiences in those clubs, I guess, to support where you're at now?
Yeah, I think the first, obviously moving to Melbourne Heart was a massive thing. I was obviously, I think it was 18 months I was at the AIS for, and then I got the opportunity to go on train with Melbourne Heart. And from that, a few of us got a contract. And it was, an unbelievable feeling. I did, in the back of my mind, I always wanted to get signed by Adelaide. And I went on a tournament with Adelaide probably a few months before that and did really well. was hoping I was going to get a contract from that for a Champions League. I think you might have been at the club at the time, and it was a Champions League contract, and it never came through. And then kind of just lost touch with Michael Valkanis, who was the one that was trying to help it along. And when Melbourne Heart came forward with an offer, I wasn't going to go to Adelaide and say, listen, they're offering me something. Are you going to give me something? It was more, well, Melbourne Heart believe in me. They think I'm a good fit for the club, and I trusted them. So I was pretty ecstatic to go there at that time, and I'm glad I did, because I think, again, moving to Canberra was one step of becoming more independent, but you were living on site there. You had people helping you. But then moving to Melbourne, I was not even 17 yet. I was living with another player. I didn't have my license yet. It was a massive city. I didn't it was a struggle. I was getting people to pick me up for training, or sometimes catching the tram, the 86 down to to the uni and walking across for an early physio appointment. And it was all these learning experiences that you would never think a professional footballer would do, but you have to. And it was a really important 4 years for me to, I guess, experience a lot of highs and a lot of lows, and understand the way that, I guess, the football club works. And the Melbourne Heart to Melbourne City transition was awesome to see as well, with the extra resources you were getting and being with world-class players. But it, I guess in the end, after that, I then ended up coming back to Adelaide the first time and won the A-League. And then coming back from Holland, I had the opportunity to go to Brisbane. And I just felt like at that stage, the club was in a better position than what Adelaide was. And I didn't feel wanted from Adelaide, if that makes sense. And as a player, that's really all you want. And the emphasis on the club has changed so much for South Australian players that they're the first ones they want to go after. And I think that's a really strong message from the club, because there's so many talented Adelaide-based players. Why would you want them to be playing for another team that can be playing for your hometown club?
Yeah, agreed. I always had that feeling too when I was in Canberra. I always wanted to come back to Melbourne, and then I ended up at Gold Coast and Adelaide, and I was always like, I wish that perspective was there, because it's kind of like sentimental coming back to your hometown club. But you really sort of I think I agree, like the position you would have gone in Canberra would have helped set you up, but it's just, you can't really compare when you go into a professional club and then you're fending for yourself, because the AIS is like, it's just incredible. Like, it was state of the art. You got fed, you got physio, anything you ever needed, you could get with a click of your fingers. Whereas when you're in the real world, you're like, okay, now I've got to start fending for myself and outside of the club. So I feel like you probably would have left Melbourne City when you did leave, like you would have, came in a boy, left a man in some regards. And I think your time at Brisbane was really, it wasn't like you hadn't already put your authority and stamp on the A-League, but you definitely really made a lot of noise there in headlines. And I'm keen to understand as well, actually, from the Brisbane journey, how the move or the deal with NEC came about in particular, because like, that's not a small club. That's a massive club in Holland in the top flight. And all our dreams as footballers is to get that move to Europe. So how did that come about? And that must have been an amazing moment for you.
Yeah, it was massive. I guess that was on the back of winning the A-League with Adelaide and getting away with the Socceroos. And my dream had always been to play in Europe. I always had it mapped out in my head. I was going to play a couple of years in the A-League. I was actually going to leave at 18 to go to Europe, but that didn't happen. So I stayed an extra couple of years, and I was away with the Socceroos at the time, and I was in England, and Robbie Violart, who was at Melbourne Heart, was in contact with me, messaged me and said, oh, maybe there's this club, because his dad was an agent or a sports director at that stage, and he just said, I'll put your name out there, as well as my agent Vince Grella, who was looking for clubs. And it just came up, and they were like, well, they're really interested. There's a couple of other teams. Harry Kuehl was at Watford then in the reserves, and he was speaking as well to Vince Grella, and there was an Italian team that really was keen as well. And I just felt that the best move was to go to Holland because of the league that it is. It was the least amount of money to earn there by a long way, but the footballing journey was, I guess, the right fit for that, in the sense of, if I could go there and play, I was going to be able to get another move, rather than going to a big club and really struggling, probably going out on loan. So it was something that it made sense, and it was the right footballing decision, and something that I've always tried to base every decision off. Has not been money, it's been football. And it didn't work out the best football when I was there, But again, what I learned off the field has put me in this position today. So as harsh as that 12 months was, it was the best 12 months of my life as well in other ways.
Why for you, like, and because this is like, football can be a real lonely game sometimes, especially when you have these moves and these opportunities where you're living your dream and then you realize, like, actually, I'm not even getting recognized, or the opportunity is not there, or I'm injured, or whatever, it doesn't go to plan. Like, for you, what was really tough about that period, and how do you think coming out of it, like, what's that giving you back?
Yeah, I guess I went there. So the coach was a German Dutch guy. He'd been at Borussia Dortmund and in the under 18s or 16s, and he was speaking to my agent. My agent flew over there, Vincuella, who was in Italy, so it was an easy flight to go there. Spoke to him. They were saying, we want to play exactly like Adelaide, the same as Dortmund, almost with the 1-6, 2 10s. He'll be one of the 10s. He's going to be playing every week. And I was like, wow, this is going to be awesome. I watch Dortmund all the time. They play unbelievable football. Yeah. Things are going to be great. Got there and spent the first couple of weeks training, and it was hard to adjust, but I was still on a high confidence-wise and really excited, and played a few games, and we just got smashed. And like, the training that we were doing was just bad, to be honest. There's no other way to put it. Just basic things like passing drills. The cones were too close to the other passing drills, so balls were hitting into each other, and I just felt like it was very, it was a big step back from what I was experiencing at Adelaide coaching wise. And that's obviously was a massive surprise. And then played the first game of the season, got taken off after half time, and didn't play for the next couple of weeks. That was really hard to take. And then I went and asked the coach, I was like, what's going on? Like, I don't really understand. Obviously, I don't think I played my best, but I thought I was okay. And he said, we want you to be quicker. And he's like, we need you to be faster. And I said, well, I'm 20, 21. I'm not going to become faster all of a sudden like that. It's not going to it's just not going to happen. So I'm as quick as what I am now as what I was in Adelaide when you're looking at the footage.
Yeah.
I think that was just his way of looking at it. And I guess the German way, they love power. They love people that are really explosive. And to be honest, compared to some of the other players, I wasn't. But at the same time, I think it was more so a bit of an excuse, and he played players he probably trusted a little bit more. And then from there, it was really hard mentally to deal with that setback. And that probably crushed me a little bit, because I felt like, well, I can't do anything to change this. And the biggest thing I regret is I think I did give up a little bit, and I stopped trying in some sessions, because I thought, well, I can't get quicker. What's the point? Where I should have had the attitude of, all right, I'm going to prove this guy wrong. I'm going to be the best at training every single day. And that's something that I took out of it, was as bad as a coach can be, or as bad as an environment you can be in, you can still control your outlook on it and what you're kind of putting out there. So it was a massive learning experience from that side of things, of the mental side of the game. And, I loved living in Holland. I loved living overseas. I'd do anything to go back to Europe, because it's, it's the world of football where they live and breathe it there, like it's a religion, I guess.
So I guess leading into we'll see, you kind of segued into the mental aspect of the game, but just before we do, like, for you to finish your career and sort of look back with no regrets, do you think you've got to get back to Europe at least some point, and kind of just fulfill what maybe you couldn't there last time? Or is it's kind of, it's a different.
It would be, it was, I think my only regret in football I have today is my attitude when I was in Holland after probably the first 3 or 4 months, but I really can't change that now. All I can do is obviously worry about the way I'm acting now. If the opportunity came up to go to Holland or another country in Europe, I would jump at it. But at the same time, it's not as easy the older you get, and obviously the money now with COVID is probably smaller in those countries. So there's a lot more that goes into it. But if I could get back there, I would love to.
But do you know what? I actually because I resonate with what you're saying around those challenges when you get shafted by a coach and you got to turn up every day and train. I actually think that's one of the hardest things in football, is to turn up every day knowing you're not wanted and still trying to be the best. So the fact that, like, you look back on that as like a regret, like, I was self-imploding every week when I wasn't picked. So, but it is like, that's the mental toughness that comes with the game. It's like, you've got to put that aside. And it's really interesting, your journey, and I touched on it at the start of the episode, was how you've kind of moved towards, I guess, a real sort of mental aspect and real focused on the mental and mindfulness nature of the athlete, and how that sort of helps performance. So before we go into, I guess, the concept of the inner game journal and where that came from, but what really sort of drew you to mindfulness and also sort of meditation and focusing on the mental aspect?
I think I've always been someone that has wanted to do anything possible to become better. And that actually started when I was at the AIS, being exposed to what we spoke about, earlier with nutritionists, sports psychologists, sports science, your recovery. You're just surrounded by everything that you needed to be better. And I had probably a fear of not fulfilling my potential. And I never wanted to look back with regret and be like, I didn't make it because of X, Y, and Z. And I think it was in your talk, you actually spoke about there's only a certain percentage of players that come to the AIS that get a contract. And from that, I was like, wow, I need to make sure that obviously out of this, it was, 30% or 20%, something like that. I can't even remember exactly. I need to be one of those. So if I'm going to be like that, I need to make sure I kind of give it everything. And then going into the elite environment, it was the same thing. I always thought, well, I don't need to go on that night out, or I don't need to drink the alcohol, or don't need to have that chocolate bar. Those are probably the first things I was focusing on. The mental side of it was something that is less spoken about and still is to this day. I think it's not focused on as, and I don't know why.
It's my biggest regret was not training my brain as hard as I trained my technique, because it wasn't made aware as a kid. It wasn't important. It's so critical, isn't it?
I think, it's the most important thing. I think the hardest thing, and probably why it's not spoken about more or it's not invested in more, is that it's not tangible. So, you get a sports science guy in and he says, well, I'm going to get your players running an extra 10% more than what they did per game last year. You can see that in the results, on the GPS. But if someone comes in and says, I'm going to train everyone so they're playing 10% better and they're mentally feeling better, how can you judge that? It's something that's not able to be. And I think that's why it's slowly getting more tapped into, because certain, probably like a Richmond, for example, in the AFL, they've spoken about it a lot more. And obviously Ash Barty with tennis, with Ben Crowe's obviously in that field. And there's plenty of others that are now speaking a whole lot more about it. And you're seeing how much more powerful it is. And that, led me into when I was at Melbourne City, I started to write goals. I had a vision board and all these things back then that I was very secretive about, because I thought it was, probably was very foreign compared to what other players are doing. But I had it in my room. So if any boys were coming over, I'd have to quickly go in there and hide it because it was embarrassing.
That's amazing, man. I can completely understand your perspective there as well, because that's the lads' environment. Like, are you all right, mate? Like, just But it's beautiful what you're doing, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was that's really where it started, and in Holland was probably where I struggled the most, and that's where I started to read a lot more books and kind of look into it a whole lot more, and thought, well, this is probably the last piece of the puzzle. I know I'm a good player. Like, I've proven that I'm a good player. I can do it at a certain level. And coming back to Melbourne after that, I got introduced to a guy that taught me meditation through a mentor and physio friend of mine, and I really enjoyed that aspect. And then it was, I guess, about just trying to figure out what works best for me, because there's no one size fits all, and that it's just, trying different things. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, I won't do it anymore. And that's kind of how it's been.
So when you're sort of, like, your concept of meditation, is it more just for yourself to kind of have that sort of inner peace, or is it kind of like a way to break away from the game and distance yourself from, the rigors of what football is? Because I actually don't think it's very hard for a lot of athletes to leave football on the pitch, and when they go home to have a separate life. A lot of people take it, what happens on the pitch back home, and I was one of them. So is that sort of your concept of where you think it helps?
Yeah, I think just being able to relax yourself, or I do it, I think I'm going to say like transcendental meditation. So I focus on a mantra, and I do it every morning. I'll do it for 20 minutes when I wake up. And then most afternoons I try to do it, when I get tired around 3-4 o'clock, I'll do that again for 20 minutes or 15 minutes if I can. And it was just something that I think I needed at that point in my life. And it helps me as much on the field as it does off the field. I just, especially when you have a really nice meditation, you kind of get out of that and you're just so much clearer in all your thoughts. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to play the best, but it means that I'm going to feel a lot better as a person, and that obviously improves my performance on the field. So it's something that I think everybody should try, whether it's, there's different types of meditation, and it's a big thing at the moment. I think everybody in lockdown, it's something that everybody could be doing for 5 or 10 minutes just to make themselves feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually think like a lot of athletes don't really tap into the spiritual side of themselves because for whatever reason, but I feel my perspective on it is it's actually quite beneficial because you're quite defined by numbers and statistics like games to goals or, how many assists you've played, how many games did you play last year? Like that's what people judge you off. And sometimes you start believing those judgments and taking that into your personality. So I do want to get into a couple of actual examples of like mental health with professional athletes. We've seen quite a few of late, and I just wanted to kind of speak to it because I know there's probably stuff that you've been through and obviously had to face and you could probably resonate. But did you see the gymnast, the American gymnast, what's her name, Simone Biles, or when she pulled out mid-Olympics just because mentally she just didn't want to compete. She didn't feel like she needed a break. And it was literally like one event before the gold medal. And then also then there was Naomi Osaka at the Roland Garros just pulled out because she didn't want to do media and mental health and it's pretty. Does that resonate with you? Can you understand that? Because there's obviously a lot of people outside that are like, "What are you doing?" But they don't really understand, right?
Yeah, it's really it's so hard to understand. I've never gotten to the point where I wasn't going to rock up for a game. But I also think I guess it's hard because my pressure, if I feel like I'm under as much pressure as I possibly can be, that's the same as Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, even though they're at different levels. My maximum pressure that I've faced is my maximum.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that I'm all of a sudden more resilient than them, but I've probably been fortunate enough that maybe my mechanisms that I've created for myself work, and maybe what they needed at that time was to step away from the game or from performing in front of billions of people. And it's something that, every player 100% feels that pressure of performing at their best. And those two are expected to win. Simone Biles, she's obviously the greatest gymnast ever, but she's expected to go out there and win gold. And even though from having a little bit of knowledge of gymnastics through my partner, she is better than everyone else. She's just better. There's no other way about it. She has to go out there and perform. Like, she's maybe a superior athlete, but, if she's having doubts about herself and then, she makes a mistake, it's going to be pretty critical that, she's flipping in the air and she's made a mistake because she's doubted herself. She's going to really hurt herself. So it's probably different in that aspect, that you want to make sure that you're 100% committed to what you're doing. And Naomi Osaka as well, it's more sad to see, I think, because how much they're struggling, and like what you spoke about before, being an athlete is our life. So if we're choosing not to do that, there must be a really, really big issue, and it's something that is now spoken about a lot more in a positive way, that before you would have got called weak and you can't hack it and that's just not good enough, where now it's almost like, well, no, they're extremely brave for coming out and actually showing how vulnerable they are right now. And it's something that will hopefully make more junior athletes tap into this at a younger age. So hopefully they don't get to that point. That, I think, is the biggest thing.
When you talk about that, like the thing that I guess makes me sort of like prompts my interest about this is when Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka are making noise of this. I'm like, how many athletes are actually going through the same thing but don't say it? Because I reckon a lot of people would turn up and try and play at the highest level under the biggest scrutiny and not really be in the best headspace possible. And for all the listeners out there, the reason why we're talking through some of these points and highlighting the above is really because of I think it's actually an incredible idea, and the venture and the business around what you're doing, but also how it's going to help athletes and their performance is something quite unique with the Inner Game Journal that you've developed and brought over the last couple of years. So for all those that don't know what it is, can you talk us through it and how it came about?
Yeah, so it's I guess it's a journal that's based around everything that I think an athlete needs to be the best person they can be, but also the best athlete. And I think, you can't have one without having the other. And that was something that I learned a lot when I was over in Holland, and then came back to Australia. And I obviously put all my eggs in being an athlete, and I defined myself, and I'm sure it's what you did as a footballer. So when that gets taken away through injury or not getting a contract, you're almost got no self-worth. And that was something that I didn't want to happen. So I was like, well, I need to create, obviously who I am as a person, and mold that into obviously then the footballer as well. And through obviously all the experiences I went through, I just had, different things that I thought were important. And I started doing it myself, there was gratitude journals and just blank journals and vision boards, and figuring out what I thought my values were, and just everything. And I just started to, put it together into, first it started with a big A4 folder with plastic sleeves, and I was carrying that around everywhere. And that was a struggle on away trips. And at the start I was hiding it from people, similar to when I was
so this
younger.
Is like you're just doing this for yourself at this point, and you created your own construct and formula. Okay.
Yeah, so that's how I first got into it, and then it was funny that I was carrying that around, and there was Jack Hingett at Brisbane who probably saw me and was thinking, what is that? And I obviously explained to him, that's cool, but I really found that it helped me. And then I got one made at Officeworks, which was A5, and it was a little bit nicer, and I started to put in like a vision board at the front through reading a few different books, my purpose, value. So I then combined it all, and it was a little bit nicer, and I was just feeling really good about doing it. And I showed another player who was like, wow, that's awesome. Maybe you can make me one. And that was just before COVID hit. So then during COVID, I just started to think about, well, maybe I can make my own nice one online, and I can just get those made. And I was looking everywhere for an athlete journal. There was just nothing out there. There was blank journals. There was gratitude journals. There was affirmation. There was all these different types of journals, but nothing specific for an athlete. And I was actually amazed that there wasn't so far, obviously, with how important it is. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll create my own, and that was going to cost me like $150 to do. And I was like, well, that's not possible to do for a business or myself. Mm. So I guess I then went on the journey of trying to, source manufacturers overseas and put it all together. And I was fortunate again that Ben Garuccio, who's my best mate, his girlfriend can do very cool things on in design. Mm-hmm. and graphic design, and she could make it for me. So then we just started talking in the hub and put everything together, and then it was, all right, now we need to set up everything for a business, obviously. So a website, different bank details, and I guess everybody in the hub was playing a lot of, whether it's PlayStation, watching movies, or playing cards. And I still did obviously a lot of that, but I spent a lot of my time walking around and just sitting down and trying to figure out how it was best to do this, because it was something that I know how much I struggled. And I just thought, well, if I'm struggling, there has to be all these other athletes that are struggling as well. So let's just give it a crack, and let's see how many I can kind of get to. And that's how it all came about.
Mate, it's insane. And it's kind of amazing, because it's like, when you brought it out, I was like, oh, no shit. Like that could really help. And it's like, why the fuck is that why has that not come about before,
Yeah.
But like, so just to talk through like the actual sort of fundamentals of the journal. So is it really like, how is it going to offer support for individuals and athletes? Like, are they documenting things that they're going through? Are they talking about training, performance? Is it goal setting? Like, how does it kind of give them sort of value back?
Yeah, so I guess there's two different versions. So at the moment, there's the athlete performance journal, which is the main one, and that's a 3-month one. And then you've got the youth performance journal, which is obviously more for younger athletes. And I think both of them have a vision board at the start. So again, getting an athlete to think about what does their future look like on the field, off the field, photos of loved ones or future endeavors that they have, going to the Olympics, World Cup, playing for your dream team, all these things that whenever they open it up every day, they look at it and they get inspired by it, which I think a lot of people now create vision boards. I know I did, again, like I spoke about, but a lot of the time you then stop looking at it almost because it's in a study or it's in a second bedroom and you don't go into it. So I was like, well, if I look at it every day when I open it up, visually, I'm then going to get excited and be motivated and probably more confident. So that was a really powerful thing to have in it. And then you go into a self-discovery almost, which is purpose, vision, values, and a message to your younger self. And I felt that was a really important thing for me, because I, like what I spoke about, I'm, a human being first before a footballer. So I need to know what my purpose is, what my values are. So every day I'm in alignment with that, and that then goes on to the field. So for me, my purpose is, to inspire everyone else around me to be the best they can be. So whether I'm on this podcast chatting to you, whether I'm in the street helping a random person or playing a football game, I can still do that. That purpose is still there. And I guess it creates a powerful thing for me, whether I'm playing football or not, because touch wood, an injury could happen and I might not be able to play, or I might not get a contract, but that purpose never changes. And that's what I believe makes me go out and play better, because I'm not just focused on being the best player I can be and I need to reach a certain level. I'm focused on being the best person I can be. So when I'm playing, I'm working hard, I'm doing everything right so I can inspire a kid in the crowd or my teammates to be the best they can be, which is really powerful. And then next you go into some mindset goals you want to set for yourself, and again, some photos of people that will inspire you to do that. So, if you want to be obviously very strong mentally on the field or the court or whatever it is you play, you put people there like a Michael Jordan or a Cristiano Ronaldo, people that you think almost, what would they do in this situation? What if they missed a penalty? What would they think like? And I know that's not
awesome.
Always, you're not going to always think like that straight away, but I guess the more you look at it and the more you read it, it's subconsciously now in you. So when you're on the field, hopefully you're like, all right, I've made a mistake, but I don't care. I'm on to this next thing. So it's almost, you're hopefully becoming your own, your own self, like psychologist, and trying to improve yourself as a person and as an athlete. And then you go into your, weekly planning, weekly review, which obviously everything off the field contributes to on the field. So making sure everything's in order. And then your daily pages is spread out into, your schedule, gratitude, goals off the field, performance goals, which I try and do more process goals, a review section of training, which you can individualize and do your own specific skills, and then just a journaling section. So it's pretty full on. And I've just tried to make it very simple that if some random person picked it up, they would almost be able to do it without having a guidebook with them.
Wow, man. It's pretty cool. You touch on that point around Michael Jordan. It's like, I understand now the philosophy behind it, because I'll go back to the example of you in Holland. When you had that down period and you were sort of negative, maybe that perspective there would have been really good. Like, how would Michael Jordan respond to this? Like, would he, you know what I mean? Like, and having that inbuilt in your psychology, that's kind of what you're saying, right? Little things like that, I assume. Yeah.
Like, you're just trying to, I guess, promote good self-talk and positive self-talk rather than negative self-talk, because it's going to happen regardless. I think, you start to say bad things, but if you can stop it, the bad comments to yourself quickly, and make them positive comments, or without you even realizing, if you're, 5 minutes to go in the game and you're thinking, I'm going to score this winning goal. That's all you're saying to yourself. I'm not saying you're always going to do it, but you've probably got more of a chance that you're actually 100%. Going to do it then than if you're not saying it.
Correct.
So it's really just priming your brain and I guess who you want to be. So that's the main concept behind it. And I think it's been really well received so far, and hopefully it's just going to go bigger, because I guess the main reason why it was created was to help other athletes, whether they're professional, semi-professional, a mum or a dad that just likes being active. I think anyone that can go out and exercise is classified as an athlete. So
100%. Yeah, everyone's an athlete in my eyes as well. And it's actually like, it's so beneficial, this journal, folks, that it's actually something that every child or kid or teenager who's playing sport, I think should have as like a weapon to start sort of mentally training themselves and preparing themselves for how you need to think as a professional athlete. And coming back to like the business aspect of this, because that's like something that I'm also interested in. Like for you, like is this something you're trying to do on a larger scale? You're trying to impact obviously a lot of communities, a lot of football clubs, a lot of professional athletes, all in the one. So I'm just keen to understand, I guess, your perspective on, how you're looking to maybe approach that. And then two was, I've seen that you've partnered with certain people and great professional Australian athletes that are, ambassadors on the Inner Game Journal as well. So, how did that how you were arranging those engagements as well?
Yeah, I guess the business side of things was something that I've always been interested in since I was a bit younger. And obviously bit entrepreneurial, but I never really understood how to go about anything. I always had ideas, but it was like, how can I do it? And this obviously was an easier one to do, and I could use my profile a bit more. And it's been a big learning experience. There's been so many things along the way that keep popping up, and you're like, well, I've got a great product now. Why isn't everyone buying it? Well, it's like, okay, well, you need to get it in front of people, and you need to actually sell it to them. If I was doing a podcast with everyone, they probably would buy a journal afterwards, but I obviously can't do that with all the people in the world. So it's trying to find ways to obviously sell the product and make it be exposed to the right people.
Correct, yeah.
and resonate with different people. So that's been really cool to go through that process. And I'm lucky enough, I've had some good mentors, some people, the vacay swimwear guys. I played with one of the guys from there, Geordie Callios, and he's helped me out quite a lot, putting me in touch with good people. And I guess just being connected to other athletes has happened through word of mouth, and it's something that's actually really strange, and you would have experienced it as well. We, for some reason, when we play football, we only interact with footballers. And if you play AFL, you only interact with AFL players. And I don't know why it's always been like that, but we should probably connect a lot more, because we have the same challenges, the same problems, and we could probably learn a lot off each other. But you never would just start randomly messaging those people on Instagram and say, hey man, would love to catch up for a coffee, because they'd probably turn about, why?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Where I've actually, it'd be a random thing. If some random player did that, I'd be like, that's strange, but all right, I guess I would be okay for it. Some people would be like, no, I'm not catching up. This guy's a weirdo.
Yeah.
But I've now got that reason to kind of message them. So I've been able to have conversations with them around it. And that's probably been the most exciting thing about it, is I've been able to meet different athletes from different sports and get to know them a little bit better and understand they go through the same things. And it's all just really exciting to know that anything, if I started a t-shirt company and did that, a lot of them would be like, pay me X amount. Well, a lot of them have been really good about it because they want to promote the same thing. Mental health is important, and teaching younger athletes, but obviously other ones, this is a product that can obviously help you, and you should look into it. So I've been very, very fortunate, and then to partner with obviously the athletes, but then recently with our players union, the PFA, they've been really big, and their whole message is obviously about improving people on the field and off the field. So I've loved to be able to partner with them, and hopefully I'll be starting some workshops with the younger athletes and footballers, which I've been doing with clubs here. So it's been really good, and trying to juggle obviously being a footballer, the captain, and the journals has been really tough, but it's something that's actually, I reckon, has improved my performance on the field and who I am as a person. So it's a really good thing that I've been able to find.
Kudos to you, man. It's pretty amazing what you're doing. I think you're doing a lot of inspirational things on the field and off the field, as you've spoken of. The Inner Game Journal, peeps, I do highly recommend any athlete give it a look. It may not be for everyone, but I tell you what, you've got to give it a try first. And I think there's some fundamental benefits that people can really, really hone in on. And Steph, you've spoke of obviously your own experiences there, and how you've created this concept into a reality, and now seeing like the best that in the field, certain fields of sports actually go, this is really helpful. And that must be so fulfilling. And I actually got a phone call the other day, and I mentioned to a friend in Adelaide, I had you coming on, and they passed on a story that I wanted to bring up to see if it's true, because, but apparently the great Andrew McLeod, as everyone should know, one of the best halfback players in the AFL, in AFL history, and probably the best Indigenous player that's ever played the game in Australia. So, obviously living in Adelaide, and I believe there may have been an order that came in from the McLeod household, at least maybe you presume. So you thought, oh, you know what, I'll go over there and hand this one in person and do the right thing. They're a local, and obviously it's Andrew McLeod, why not? And apparently that you went over, gave the journal to Andrew McLeod, and he just had absolutely no idea who you were. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, it's I would love to say it's not true for his sake, but it's 100% true. It was a very, very, very strange experience, and I went on his podcast a few months back, and they explained the story, and he felt terrible about it, and he was making excuses, saying that he was tired and maybe a bit hungover from the night before, and he couldn't see over the fence.
Oh,
and,
that's rubbish.
Yeah, I think he maybe he just had no idea, and honestly I was just a courier driver for him.
Yeah.
So it was
oh mate, that's one of the great stories ever.
Yeah, it was good. It was funny, and to relive it on the podcast was was good with him, and they were giving him a fair bit of shit for it. So it's pretty funny.
Mate, awesome. Final one for me, man. What are your goals for this season? What's a great season in the A-League look like for Stefan Mauk?
So I guess the big thing for me is I want to win. I want to win something. So I think, us winning the championship is the main goal individually. I set goals at the start of the season of scoring X amount of goals and assists and stuff like that. So I've got no problem with saying I want to score over 10 goals. But one thing that I've done really religiously over the last couple of years is I set those goals, and then I don't look at them anymore, and then I just focus on the process goals. So every single day I have things that I need to work on, and if I can focus on my process goals, then the end result is normally really positive. So that's the big one for me.
Awesome, bro. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, man. Very well spoken, very insightful, very intuitive, and also the Inner Game Journal. What a concept, bro. Really, really proud to see what you're doing. Obviously, my presentation back in the day must have really spurred you on to do some great things. But no, it's been a pleasure having you on, mate. And really looking forward to seeing how you go this season.
Cheers, I appreciate it, and we'll speak soon.